Alright, we're going to do another waterfall scene, and if you'll bear with me, I'm going full page here. I don't do it often, but I am looking to create some content for those who might be interested in watching my videos, and if we're all cooped up and you have a lot of time, not that everyone has that, but if you do, and you feel like just throwing something on in the background and watching the scene develop, glad to have you with me. Hope you're safe and well, and we'll see where this video gets to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a scene like I did yesterday, previous video, and that's going to be doing this waterfall scene. I was looking at this waterfall scene that I did, and I was thinking, oh, you know, this would have really been dramatic with those light beams coming through this. They call them crepuscular rays, and I thought that would look really cool in a waterfall composition, something I've never done before. But you know how a beam would come across this way, and when it hits the mist being churned up by that moving water, that beam would become stronger. So I mean, those crepuscular rays throughout this kind of forested area in a waterfall setting, I thought that would look really awesome. And I don't recall doing that before, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, now just so that things aren't completely redundant from that composition yesterday, let's do this in a completely different color scheme. And it's a color scheme that I've used before years ago in this in a similar composition, but let's see here. This is a lot of area to fill. I could do it this way too. Do I want to do it this way? Let me see here. These trees. I have to kind of build it up high enough. Let's go horizontal. I don't know. Spot decision. Okay, but anyways, what I was saying is that I've done this before in this kind of brown color scheme, and it was a really significant scene for me in terms of my technique or stamping development, whatever you want to call it. And it's because I used white pigment ink in it at the base of the waterfalls. It was for a Rubber Stamp Madness ad. And at one point in time, I started taking out full-page ads, and in that magazine, it was a tabloid-sized magazine, so it was really big. So, full-page scenes, in addition to a little bit more even, they were really big. All right, now I added a little bit of brown. You can't see any of the brown in there at all. This brown is so dry, it's not leaving any, but I don't know, I'm trying to get some of this down here. But a brown tone scene, then I like adding these little pink and blue embellishments in there. Color embellishments for some added effect. Okay, let's see here. Let's go. I'm overlapping these right here, okay? So, I've been working on Stampscapes University series, and this is no different than working on a quarter-page scene. I mean, we have a lot more space, but I'm still utilizing kind of those foundation elements, though, that I'm teaching in Stampscapes University. You know, it's kind of, you get your scenes set. What is it about? Is it about a chapel? Is it about a lakeside cove? Is it about an ocean or something like that? You kind of get those. It's usually bigger stamps, not all the time, but those kind of bigger stamps, elements situated. And it's kind of like you can work smaller elements around it, so work from big to small. It's not always the case. I mean, we'll go with some small ones and we'll add in some larger trees or something like that, but it's no different than, you know, it's kind of like when you're trying to fit things into a certain space, right? Into a closet, or you got to put stuff in storage. You're usually going to kind of fit the larger things first, work everything around it. Or you're decorating a room. Where's the bed going to go and whatnot? Usually don't kind of decorate around like a vase or something like that. Okay, adding some of this down. I'm kind of filling in here with the same stamp here. This is the Babbling Brook, and this is the Brook Falls. I can go for this one again over here too, or I can add this again over here, or I can use completely different imagery as well. It doesn't really matter. Okay, but this is another thing that I'm going to go into with Stampscapes University. It's about using partial imagery for what you want. So in other types of stamping, quite often what we're doing is we're utilizing the entire design for something. You know, it's a specific subject matter. It's usually the focal point type of imagery that we're working with, okay, and other types of stamping. But with scenic stamping, you're just kind of using elements. I mean, this is certainly a focal point, and you can stamp the whole thing, but you can also use portions around it for different purposes, okay? All right, here's this rock in the back. I'm thinking about using that, or I can use it in the foreground, okay? Here's a smaller version. Maybe this would be a better choice to use in the background here for some additional rocks. I do stamp these trees in here. If I can fit that in there, I should be able to, no problem. But you just use, you know, portions of things. And that way, in doing so, you can get a lot better mileage out of your stamps if you can use them for multiple purposes. Sometimes things are, you know, very focal point oriented in scenic stamping. If you're stamping a lighthouse or something like that, I don't know if you're going to use part of the building for another area of your scene, or a cabin or something like that, but I try to design my stamps with multiple purposes in mind, so I use that eye so that, you know, we have this kind of a, I don't know what to, it's kind of a, from a value perspective, okay. So when I'm drawing a design, I'm looking at it as a whole, I'm looking at it as a partial, and I'm looking at it as something that will be used in conjunction with other stamps, and possibly other stamps from other companies too. I really like to use my stamps as backgrounds for other companies' designs as well. Okay, so that's tree trunk right there. We'll add in some more in here. There's plenty of space on an 8.5 by 11. Okay, now if you watched yesterday's scene, previous video, what I'm doing right here with my paper towel is I'm wiping off parts of the design. This is also in the second Stampscapes University video on that playlist. You just kind of wipe off a portion of your stamp that's going to be the portion of the design that's facing your light source, okay? So in here, I imagine this light is going to be coming in from right in here, okay? So on the side, or maybe in the back of this tree, so I kind of wiped off both sides. That's why it's a little bit more kind of gray than black. And that gives me a really nice, super easy head start for scenic lighting, okay? So, when I stamp this image right here, if the light is coming from over here, what I've done is I've wiped off a lot of that ink off this side, so it stamps out more gray, or whatever your color you're doing it in. If you're doing it in dark brown, then wipe off some of that dark brown, just so it stamps out drier, and thus lighter on that side, and that'll give you a really fast and easy head start towards that light source and the lighting direction. Okay, so everything to the right of that light source will be left side illuminated. Okay, doesn't have to be complicated, just everything over here, just wipe off the left side of it before you stamp it out. Okay, and there's nothing really, it's nothing, you know, the concept is nothing harder than that. I don't always do that. It's just kind of a head start to doing something like that. Okay. I've done a little masking here. I didn't want, that bottom of that trunk to just go right down into those rocks. It went in that one right over there. A little bit, but no big deal. All this area is going to get filled in anyway. Filling in with this additional boulders with lichen right here. There was that little gap in there because I'm thinking about putting this other tree right in here, okay? Where do we wipe it off? We'll wipe it off right there. Took it off about that much right there. Okay, can you see it right here? Let me see if I can capture it a little bit. I don't know if you can see it's kind of real shiny right there, and right here it's not, it's a little bit more dull. Can you see that right there? Where it's a little bit more dry right here? That's where I've wiped it off. Sometimes I don't wipe off enough. It's just stamps as dark as, what it looked like, but if it does stamp out as dark as, as if you didn't wipe anything off or try to, it's not going to be a big deal. It's just, like I said, it's just a head start. There's other things we can do. We can use some pigment ink over it to lighten up one side or the other, which we'll probably do. See that right there? You can see these sides of the tree are lighter than the opposite side of them. Okay? And we can go for some more in here if we want to. Go with this one in the background or something. I have the tree trunk trio that I often use in conjunction with that one. They're kind of a good pairing. All right. Okay, I have to kind of remind myself what side. Sometimes I wipe off the wrong side. Just because we flip it over and it's on the opposite side, of course, when we're doing that. Okay, kind of wiping off the bottom and thinking of some mist or something like that in here. Here's my mask, A lot of people always ask me about masks, and I almost never do a real careful mask. It's always just a torn paper towel, or I would say 98% of the time it's a torn paper towel. And it's nothing more than that. It's just a very easy process here. I like simplicity. I mean, with a design like, a scene like this, maybe it'll look a little bit more complex, but I don't want the process to be complex. I want the process to be really simple. And everything I'm doing is fairly methodical, and it's not, nothing that I'm doing, I'm getting all smudges down here, but that won't even matter. I mean, sometimes I stamp out a stamp and, part of it didn't stamp out, because I didn't put enough pressure or something like that. That happened yesterday, but it just didn't matter because, we're going to be toning it in, we're going to be adding all kinds of different things in there. If half the stamp doesn't stamp out, and yeah, maybe I'll try to hit it again, but I don't worry about things like that. It all comes together in the end anyway. And some people will say, well, for you. Well, I mean, it'll be for anyone if you utilize these same techniques. And like I said, I try to keep it really simple. It's not just, I don't keep it simple so that other people can do it. I keep it simple for me. Because I don't want to, have to deal with certain things. Okay, I don't want these 3 trees again, but I do want maybe 1 or 2, or a single one. So I'm going to clean off the stamp. Let's see, which one do I want in here? Maybe I'll go for maybe that center one right there. Alright, this would be easier if I had a... Let's do this right here. I'll try to ink that up like so. Okay, that center one right there. I want it to be light so it looks farther off in the distance, so I'll blot it off once like that. And then let's take this wet paper towel and clean off these side trees. That's why I did the 3 of them together like this. if you have one tree, you can't necessarily add two more in the impression, but you can certainly just stamp out a partial, right? So it goes back to my comment on using portions of your stamps for what you want. You don't always have to use the whole thing. Okay, let's see. Light is coming from that way. Wiping off the right side of it so that it's left side illuminated. Okay. Going with the mask here. Like so. Okay. Have a little bit of that rock showing. And stamp your tree out. Okay. Something like that. It was this one. Let's go for this really narrow one, maybe. Okay, let's go for the side one right here. Okay. Utilize that same technique. Let's take off this ink here from the center tree now. Let's blot this off once and go for the second impression of it. I might even go for a third. Okay, let's go with that one. Let's go for a third. Let's kind of tilt it a little bit. Okay. So notice we have our tree row back in there now. Yeah, what are these? Little bits of ink pad or so. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's from my paper towel. Okay, so we have our foundation pretty well set in here. So we have our main imagery. The trees are going to serve as backgrounds in here, okay? And now, what do we have? We have foreground, okay? We can add other things like filler stamps or things like that, you know, in the spirit of the Stampscapes University. Main image. These are backgrounds right here. I mean, they're not really far in the distance, but they're definitely farther than our main imagery right here. I could put something like a moon in here or something like that, but I think I just want to keep it like an area of light. I might put a cloud back in here, though, so I can kind of narrow the area of light, so it's not just all light in here, okay? I might do something like that, I'm not sure. Well, let's do something like foreground, okay? It'll give us some shoreline to build up on. Okay, maybe I'll go with that little bit of an angle. I like to, everything's fairly horizontal here. We have a lot of verticals here. I'm going to do an angle right here just to break up kind of that static visual dynamic that's working in here. You know, to bring in some sort of, I don't know, like a slope or something of that sort. This is the Boulders with Lichen. It's just the larger version of that little one that I used back in there. Alright, so see how that kind of goes down in an angle like that. Okay, now let's go with this smaller one again. Okay, and just go with black. Let me blot it off quite a bit. And I'm going to get some impressions going back in here. And I'll stamp some on right over my trees. It's supposed to be kind of behind the trees, but if you stamp it fairly light, it doesn't really matter. I just want to create a little bit more depth within that space. Okay, now that being said, if you watched that video yesterday, which you don't have to, you know, I'm just keep referring to it because this is the same kind of imagery that I used. What I did with this was I blotted it off and I went for some lighter impressions of it in my water. It's just kind of texture, okay? And hopefully what it looks like is it kind of lends the spirit of clarity and, what's the word I'm looking for? Transparency to the water. You know, if you see this body of water, you know, if it's fairly clear, you can see down through the top layer, right? So that's what I'm doing here with these rocks. They're just smaller versions, and it just adds that little extra texture and depth into a given space, okay? I mean, it doesn't look good just as is, you know, at all. But I just know that it's going to get covered up with color and different media with pigment ink and so on and so forth, okay? Let's go like something like that. All right. It looks all kind of muddy and stuff with that down there. Kind of muddy looking, unrefined impressions, but hopefully they add up to a really pleasant overall. Okay, so that's pretty much our foundation. We have other foreground imagery to go in this scene and other types of imagery, but that's pretty much the foundation of it right there. Let's go into this now and let's add some additional touches, okay? And that'll give us a really good kind of feeling of what this scene will eventually be about, okay? Now this scene is going to be done in brown tones for the most part, warm tones, okay? So I'm going to take this stamp now, and my theory is that if there's kind of this warm, brownish, kind of a rays of light coming into the scene, things that are reflective, like this cloud in the mist and whatnot, will be the color of that light. So I'm going to stamp it in a warm tone, okay? The light might be lighter, but if I stamp this too light, we won't be able to see it. So I'm staying within my color scheme, like a medium tone version of whatever color that will be used in my color scheme. And I am going to color with that brown eventually. So this will be my choice for, you know, a highly reflective cloud within the given composition. Okay. I don't know if I cleaned this off really good yesterday. There's still some black on there. Let me do this again. Okay, ink up with a dry paper towel. We're blotting off the edges, and I go into this numerous times on the different video lessons. If you kind of blot off the edges real good, it'll give you a nice kind of a harmonious blend into the areas around it. Okay, now I'm going to put this into my water area for a nice kind of, I think it gives it somewhat of a mystical kind of a feeling to it, flair. Let me take off a little bit more ink here. I'm going into this like a good, I don't know, inch or so in some areas, okay? And really getting the edge so it stamps out and fades out on the sides here. I want this to be a really graceful looking composition, okay? So that's a really dry version of that. That's a little bit, I didn't take off as much on that one. So you see something like that. Let's go for a second impression over here. Let's see if I can get anything printed out. Yeah, looks pretty good. I think a lot of this is going to get filled in with color, and I don't know if we'll be able to see these real light kind of ghost images of it, but I think it kind of lends itself to the overall very nicely. Okay, I mentioned about using this in the background too. I'm going to blot that off once over here and really blot off the side. Now I don't want this to necessarily look like it's in front of these trees. Okay, that's not my point here, but those trees will end up being a little bit darker when I end up coloring it in, so I'm not even going to worry about masking over them. It's not going to be an issue. Okay, snap this on in like that. Okay, so you have that cloud in the background, right? See where I can see it in the tree? Okay, so I'm going to color those trees in anyways, so it's not going to matter. All right, one more time, or 2 more times, I'm not sure. Blot it off. 1 or 2 more times in terms of, you know, number of additional impressions. The clouds are being top lit, right? It's like light coming from above. So if you have light coming from below them, like down here, you just turn it around like that. No, this is a bottom lit cloud, right? If I put it right here, we have top lit clouds. Oops, right here. And we have bottom lit clouds right here. Okay? So let me stamp that again. I dropped the stamp and it made an impression, but who cares? Alright, so see that little space in there? We have the top lit cloud. Oops. And the bottom lit cloud right here. So the light is coming from right in there. And, I don't know, we have that little space in there. If you do want to put some additional clouds, you can. Go with something like the light is coming from here, so I can do it this way. Does that make sense? Always have those kind of billows facing the direction of your light. Like that. So isn't it kind of starting to, you know, give us the gist, at least, of, you know, kind of the spirit of this piece, of what it might end up looking like. A lot of mystical stuff. Also, all have to come together with the use of adding color and tone and whatnot. By the way, this video might get a little bit nuts with some kids laughing and screaming in the background. They're outside right now, smashing cans with the weapons they made, but if you don't mind. Okay. Alright, I just got all my inks ready to go. Where did they go? Brown tones, okay? Mix and match what you have. This will be dye-based inks, though. I have some distress inks here in the antique linen, walnut stain, a couple of my favorites. I have some intermediate tones that are kind of in between those ones, but they're so similar I don't even bother. With Marvy, I like a lot of the brown and dark brown. I think those are great colors. I have Memento, Rich Cocoa, and Desert Sand. So it's just all kind of mix and match, and you just kind of, you go with, in terms of the process, the colors that seem to be the lightest, and you just work through those values incrementally to the darkest of them, okay? If you can't tell which one's darker than another, then it doesn't matter. Use one or the other. Okay, but I would say use what you have. Mix and match. Use whatever. I would normally start using my stylus tools, but we're kind of running low on those ones, and not everyone has those, and I don't know if you can find the wands for sale anymore. We still have some tips left, but this works really well as well, okay? All right, now here's this is where things can get confusing when there's such a large space right here, okay? Just in general, I'm going to have that light streaming through, into the scene in the form of crepuscular rays, okay? So I'm going to leave this area fairly light. If that area is going to be light, I need to take the area around it and objects around that area and make them a little bit darker, okay? when we look at things like rocks, we can see darker areas of the rocks and lighter areas of the rocks. For the most part, I mean, I'm going with a really light shade right now, so I might color all of those. But when I start moving into my medium and darker tones, I'm going to stay more in the shadows. So you can see this one right here, there's a very definitive area of light and dark right here, okay? And I did that for a reason. It's so that contrast, that dark, will contrast against those falls a lot. So it makes the falls stand out. I want my falls to be fairly light. And that's where I see some other stamps from other companies or whatever, where they failed to kind of fill in those shadows. But I think it's a really easy opportunity for people if you kind of fill those in like that, just so, you know, we don't have to, as a stamper, you know, to take care of all the shading types of things, okay? So that's why there's this these contrasts of light and dark throughout these pieces. It's called checkerboarding, where you oscillate light and dark against one another. So it has built-in contrast, okay? Where does that play into it? I've given us kind of a nice guideline of where you can just color in. You just color in those areas that are already dark on the imagery, okay? Like that. And you can leave some areas fairly light, okay? So if I go like something like this in here, okay? I'm not going to make my water blue, so to speak, because that's not the colors of the sky that's coming down in here. So see this right here? Where we start to leave some areas a little bit lighter and darker. I might color those in, you know, and kind of reserve those kind of darker tones for around some of the darkest of areas, but for the most part, see this right here? If you're keeping your water kind of light, then you just make your area around it a little bit darker, okay? Like that. And that makes those waterfalls really pop out because they're lighter, okay? Some people think, you know, that water is always blue, but water tends to be something that's a lot more reflective of the colors around it. So if you know, it's at nighttime or something like that, that water is probably black or something because it's, you know, reflecting the colors of the sky, which are not going to be blue. In a sunset scene or something like that with really some strong, beautiful, glowing, you know, light, it's probably going to be more reflective of those colors that you see in the sky, okay? It's not going to be like a high noon blue or something. Not that you can't do that, but in terms of kind of a more realistic type of look to it, which you don't always have to do by any means, okay? Realism. But just kind of follow the, you know, the cues from whatever sky you're doing. Sunsets, whatever. Pinks, purples, whatever. You know, twilight, sunset, sunrise. Alright, this is coming together pretty fast now. You see this right here, where I'm kind of keeping some areas light. I'm keeping the falls a little bit light. We have these billows of these clouds right here, kind of illuminated. I'm just on my first color now. So, you know, I do use quite a bit of my first color. Okay, now watch this right here. Let's start to tone in some of these clouds around my light source. I don't want to tone them all out, okay, but let's make some of them a little bit darker. And I'll show you what this looks like by contrast. Sometimes I'm wiping, sometimes I'm dabbing like this. I'm often using a very dry version. I'm picking up a lot of that black there. This black, I just re-inked my black pad, so it's fairly juicy, so I'm picking up some of that black and it's making it look a little bit more gray. But you see this right here, where that it's darkened right there, but doesn't it look lighter because I made these areas a little bit darker? Okay, see this area right here? Let's tone that, get some tone into that area. Like so. Okay, see that how it makes that really area stand out? Now let's see these areas in the back of these trees. Let's get some color going back there. Don't worry about having muddled applications or whatever. This is just the first color that you're working with. I'm getting muddled applications, okay? But I just know that, you know, kind of what's to come will pretty much take care of all that in the end, okay? Don't worry about kind of less than you know, beautiful periods within the process of your scene. This does not look, you know, good in terms of a final piece, okay? It's very muddled and unresolved and whatnot. So I'm not looking for a full, kind of a fully realized and resolved piece, you know, with the first step or something like that. You know, it's like if you're putting together furniture from IKEA, you know, at step number, you know, 5, you know, we're not at step number 15 yet or something like that. It's no different for pieces like this, you know. You don't kind of look at a table or something like that with one leg put on and say, oh my God, you know, this is terrible, I'm throwing it out. Okay. But, that being said, this is coming together pretty fast. It's like finger painting, isn't it? Like that with that little piece. Look how muddled that is right there with black ink. So I wasn't expecting that, but I mean, it doesn't come as any surprise just because you know, I did re-ink. I knew I was going to do a large scene like this. So I wanted a lot of, you know, dark impressions. And it's starting to smear a lot of this over here. It's looking a little muddled, but hey, you know, no big deal. We have other colors to come. And this is one of the things that I know, okay, that other people new to scenic stamping or this process might be thinking, okay, when things get a little bit muddled like this, all right, I don't worry about it at all. I'm smearing some of my blacks and, you know, I'm wiping this in there and it's gray and it's not a pure version of brown, but I'm going to be stamping some other imagery over the top of this in the end, and it's going to be very crisp imagery, okay? Some overhanging leaves or something like that. So that kind of muddled area in the background where it's smudgy and whatnot, that's a weakness if it's the first thing that you see in that area. But when I stamp these overhanging tree limbs or something like that over the top of it, I'm not necessarily trying to cover it up, but what we'll have is crisp over, kind of softer. So that kind of dynamic and contrast in textures, it suddenly becomes a very good strength. So it's not a weakness, okay? So if you get some muddled areas within your scene that look, you know, the colors are a little bit muddled or whatnot, that's not necessarily a weakness of the piece, because when you play those contrasts against one another, it'll give us a stronger sense of depth, visual depth within a piece. It's like, you know, photography, you know, when things are kind of blurred out in the background, talking about depth of field and whatnot. So sometimes having things that are a little bit, you know, kind of softer in focus or whatever, that's all part of the aesthetics that people, you know, are always going for in things like photography, okay? So I don't worry about any of that type of thing, because there's always other things that we can do in scenic stamping. You can always add a little bit more of something. You can put something over the top of it. And in the end, it all kind of adds up to a stronger overall, okay? All right. So this piece right now, this is one color. I mean, it's not looking too bad. It's definitely not coming together, though, because what you have to do is you have to get up to those colors that you stamped out your imagery in. So when I start getting into this brown right here, everything will start coming together a little bit more in terms of that lighting. But I'm going through all these preliminary steps with these other colors because it'll all add up in the end. You'll benefit from these sub layers, these base coats. Okay. Uh-oh. I think it's going to start getting loud in here. Kids can't play games and things like that without yelling, I think, even though they're, 1 foot, away from each other. It's my son and a couple of his friends. It gets really crazy when there's like 4 or 5 of them over. But even with 2, it doesn't matter. Okay, so this is a walnut stain. It looks fairly dark in terms of their indexing right here. But it's really more like that than that. I don't know, from what I've used, okay? I love it, though. I love walnut inks and things like that, too. You take walnut inks in the art world out and into the field and do these drawings and studies or whatnot. I always like that type of artwork. Okay, can you see that right there, where it's kind of a warmer brown than that antique linen? So see how we're just kind of taking it up incrementally. It's not a big jump or anything like that. Okay. Okay, you see I'm kind of building up to these colors right here, okay? Kind of retain some areas of light, okay? I start developing my shadows a little bit more the darker I get. See this right here? I drew those shadows into the design so that I'm just kind of reiterating those shadows, like at the base of the waterfall right there. There's shadows in the water, or in the rocks. There's kind of at the base of the rock, it's darker, and the top of the rock is lighter. So I'm just generally... This is where this isn't great right here. Like a stylus tool can kind of get in those areas a little bit easier. But I'm going to try and use just as much of this paper towel as I can before switching over, if I need to a stylus tool, or just, I don't know, I guess we can go like this. And something like that's, your detailed tool. Okay. Yeah, works fine. Paper towels, though, they're supposed to be absorbent, so, you kind of build up a little bit of a super saturation of it so that you're applying, that tone onto your pieces. You're going to use a little bit of a different touch, too, if you're using matte paper. Matte paper is a little bit more absorbent. You can use things like brushes or cosmetic brushes, sponges, whatever. Those work great too. The brush type of things, though, I find those take a little bit longer because they don't apply ink as fast as something that's a little bit more either absorbent and can transfer the ink over, just like the stylus tools. Or this one like here, that's kind of, it's super saturated at this point in time with ink, so most of what I ink up like that is applying on the paper. Okay, so this right here, kind of going in and adding some tone around my falls, making the falls stand out lighter by contrast. This little area in here is a little bit too light. Let's hit that a little bit. One of the things I don't do too much, like, I don't consider, like, okay, that tree is right there, so it's kind of casting its shadow over those rocks. I usually don't develop those types of shadows. I don't know, to me it's kind of confusing because it would be, like, like roundish. I don't know, maybe we can do a little bit of that, or try it with the, some alcohol ink pens, so we can just kind of draw those in, if we want to do that. I just kind of, for the most part, I just stick with the shading convention that's on the designs themselves. It makes it really easy. I don't have to think really too much. I mean, the light's coming from right there, so, I'm thinking about a little bit of that, but, I don't have to give it too much of a consideration. Okay, this is background tree. I just kind of squeeze this in a little bit more to make a much more narrow applicator. It's not giving me a real definitive streak because the ink on here is fairly dry. No, I don't know. Looks like that, I guess. Okay, it's coming off of there. It's giving me a decent amount of application. Okay, let's add some of this to the background here, in between the trees, okay? Just kind of making that a little bit darker out here. If I make this area darker, that seems lighter by contrast. Now, to me, in my eye, things are starting to look a little bit muddled. What is this? This is only my second ink. Again, I have a few more to go through. But in the end, that'll be fine because I'm going to be adding some different things into the scene. Different media and techniques and whatnot. See, doesn't that shadow anchor those rocks down a little bit more? It kind of creates a visual weight into the scene. Okay. I try to vary some of these rocks, making some a little bit darker than others, as opposed to treating the whole thing as one completely uniform whole. You know, there's different types of rocks that are darker than others, so maybe that'll kind of create a little bit of a variation. Like right here, I can kind of make that rock a little bit darker than these ones, maybe. Sometimes I forget to do, you know, things like that. Or, I don't know, I guess most of the times I kind of forget to do that. Okay, alright, that is the next tone. This is such a big scene right here. I feel like by the time I get over here, it's already kind of drying up over there. And sometimes, like distress inks, I find that they, when I use them in this kind of form like this, they dry much lighter than they look like when they're freshly applied. So I just kind of go over them again, you know, and add a little bit more. At some point in time, it's only going to get as dark as it's going to get using that existing color. So you have to kind of move into another color, your next darkest color, whatever that might be. All right, so that being said, I don't think that desert sand's going to read. Well, let's go ahead and use it. As I apply this, I just don't think we'll be able to see it. I just know it. It's very light in value, but let's see. I don't know. Maybe it'll add some sort of slightly different hue. I'm not really sure. I don't really see it. So, I mean, I could have used that one too, you know, in the beginning, as opposed to the antique linen distress. A lot of people have those distress inks. Before the distress inks, it used to be all Adirondack. They discontinued that line. The distress inks kind of were, you know, became more popular. All right, so desert sand looking pretty good. I don't know. Let's try the rich cocoa. I don't know if that one's going to be. All right, let's go with this new side of my paper. This one, I have a feeling it's going to start fraying. I mean, I used it a lot. This is only like I don't know, it's like a little tiny piece of paper towel. So talk about an inexpensive type of applicator, right? If you can find paper towels now, you know, people aren't hoarding them all. I'm using this because everyone has them, but I don't know. Now people might have 5 years worth. If you're watching this 20 years from now, I don't know, do some research. Look up, I don't know, paper goods hoarding and coronavirus or something like that. Okay, so this is the rich cocoa, kind of developing the shadows a little bit more. You don't use the darker version of your inks quite as much as you do with the the lighter ones. So don't worry about, oh my god, after the first color, it's like, oh god, I used so much of that, and it took forever. When you get into the darker tones, you're just kind of developing your shadows or whatever you might think. This one's not real dark. But look at that. It's starting to really come together in the shadows and whatnot. See down here? Like so. In water, I like to give these little striations sometimes, so I come into it like this, and I give these streaks like that. See how it tapers like that? I don't go like that. I go like that, or like that. So that's all I'm doing. I mean, if you can do this, that's kind of the motion right there and technique. See, I'm doing it in all these areas. I'm kind of doing this. It's like I'm wiping color on. Okay. Okay. I can't wait to add in those beams of light. It's kind of like the last thing in the process. I don't know, close to the last thing. You do a lot of preliminary stuff, kind of getting to that point. See this how I have my scene turned upside down? I can get to this area easier, and I can kind of see what I'm doing like this. This is kind of within my range of comfort in terms of ergonomics. Don't be afraid to turn your card around. Okay? See it as being on like a lazy Susan. And that really, I mean, it can affect the overall look of your piece too, because if you're working kind of like this and you're going out here, like my shoulder's really extended here, it's, I mean, this is okay on this side, but if I'm going over here, you'll kind of develop kind of muscle fatigue by kind of overextending. So always turn your piece into a nice, comfortable position in which to work. And you'll benefit from that in terms of your comfort, in the long run, less strain on your joints and whatever. And the pieces just look much more, I think, graceful. If you're kind of working in kind of a graceful position, you don't want to be kind of struggling with anything. All right, so that rich cocoa was darker than I thought it would be, and it affected things much better than I thought it would. So it looks good. So it wasn't a wasted thing. You can always tell, when you're working it, if the present color that you're adding is changing things enough to make it worthwhile. If it's not, then just go on to your next tone. All right, now this is brown. This is the same color brown that I stamped those clouds in. So I'm hoping that everything will start to come together a lot now with this color, okay? Because it's the color of lighting that's within the scene. We've gotten, right up to that point now where we're employing the use of that color in our toning. See this right here? It was lighter on this side of the tree, so I'm taking the area on the back side of the tree and making it darker. Make the area that's facing the light lighter. And now we can make the other side of the tree darker. And that reinforces our lighting within the scene. Okay, see this area right in here? Kind of hitting those shadows. Bringing some of this color into those clouds. Okay, and that should really start to blend them into that area down there. This is my little streak of that same color down here. Okay, right here I wrote exposure. Okay, it's starting to get a little bit darker. Let me change the exposure of this camera. Okay, that's about how dark it is. The darker my scene gets, I have to change the exposure of the camera so that it's not just exposing for a white piece of paper, which I have to kind of overexpose everything. I'm talking about just for this video, not for not the scene. It's not affecting the scene. Okay. The whole piece is looking a little bit muddled, okay? But that's going to look great up against that crisp foreground imagery that we'll be using in here. Still, I'm not quite sure what I want to do in here. I'm tempted to use that that lady rider. Not sure if I want to though or not. Could do like a theme, like she's kind of visiting the the waterfall in different seasons, or the seasons of her life, whatever. This is dark brown, so it's really kind of affecting the shadows quite a bit. Sometimes when you get to an area within your scenes, maybe not in an 8.5 by 11, this is what's a little bit different about this. I'm finding that by the time I go in here with this dark brown, if I'm working on a quarter-page scene, that quarter-page scene is really super juicy, so sometimes when I get to these darker colors, it doesn't really apply very easy because the page gets super saturated with ink. But I'm finding that working with such a large area, by the time I'm applying this wherever I want to, I do get a pretty good application of that ink wherever I happen to be applying it. It's not like wiping wet into wet where it just doesn't apply. You know, it's just sometimes it's almost like when I'm applying ink, like in this motion like this, or with the stylus tools, I'm almost like removing ink because it's just so wet and built up on the page. Okay. I love getting to these darker colors though, because I can really develop kind of the detailing and the refinements. I love doing little refinements here and there. Okay, all right. You can really see, you see how much that dark brown, first of all, that same brown, but once you go kind of past those colors into the darker ones, that's where it really starts to come together a lot more. Same colors and darker colors than it. And then I haven't even used black yet, so we use black to stamp in our imagery, and that's really going to bring things together in a pretty big way. My gosh. I don't know if that... The guys are upstairs, so if you hear the pounding, that's not happening right here. Okay. Nice, nice. Okay. Before I get to black, I was thinking about going to black right now, but I think I want to go with those accent colors right now. I love this pink right here, this bubblegum pink. If you have kind of a really light pink, if you don't have something like that, you can go with, you might have some pens, your alcohol pens, like, I don't know, Copic markers. This one's a Marvy Lip Plume Permanent. This one's a Shuttle Art ink, pale pink, I think it was, or something like that. And you can add this where I'm adding it. But if you have some kind of lighter tones of ink, I'll leave this out right here. Try some of that pink. Okay, now here's the thing about inks, okay? One of the things I was saying in Stampscapes University, I think with the second video, is you can get any version of this, whatever ink you have, from the full saturation of it all the way to white. Okay, there's a big value scale in there, okay? So if I don't want this, okay, all you do is just wipe it off like this, right? And you can go for that. Oh, sorry about that. You can go for, instead of this hot version, you can go for this, very dull version just by removing ink, right? Just like the impressions here. You can go for black and you have gray on it as well. Okay, so I want this right here, or even less, okay? Especially when I first start changing hue, okay? I want to have a lot of control over it and get the feel of what it's going to be looking like in here, okay? So, let's take a look here. I kind of start in my darker area and kind of work it into my light, where it will read as pure pink, okay? You see what I'm kind of going gentle too. I'm not building it up really fast. I'm kind of working in there very slowly, just to get some of that tone in there. I'm putting into some of my areas that are a little bit white. I don't want to get rid of all the white though. But see that right there? See that kind of pink throughout there? See, this is what it looks like without. And this is what it looks like with. Now I'm going to add more, but I just want to show you what it kind of develops from. This is very dry on here, okay? So it's like one swipe, I can't see anything. So with repeated swipes, I don't know, 15, 20, I get that real pale version of it. But look at that pink in there. See, that's just brown. But there's that brown and pink together. Okay? I think it looks pretty good, so, you can always add more. Remember to retain some of that lighter area, though. Just bring a little bit of a touch of it into the area and develop it accordingly. I mean, if you really like it, just keep developing it, more and more of it. But that's always better than kind of putting something down that you can't remove if you don't like it, okay? You can subdue the things that you put down, but you can't really remove it when it comes to dye-based inks, okay? A little pink up there. And see that little touch of it is down here. Let's put some of it in the water. I love this pink overlapping that water. I think it makes for a really great combination. Look at that. See like that? Look at that richness of it right down there. And see, if that's the color of lighting within a scene, then you can bring it over other objects like that. It's that reflective light on things. Let's bring some of that up in the sky area. It doesn't read as pink, right? Because it's over the tops of all those browns, but it is giving me a different hue through the layering and mixture, visual mixture. It's not really physically mixing with the inks that are underneath it, but you're just kind of laying like a a transparency of a certain color over another one. All right. Looks fairly rich with tone and warmth. And it's kind of an analogous color, pink next to those browns and things like that. And when you do colors, analogous colors next to each other, it creates what they call a color glow. All right, here's a little bit of blue, believe it or not. I can put maybe a little bit of it down in that where there's still a slight tinge of white, okay? Just go like that. Take some of it off. I think in the, I have some distress ink. The tumbled glass might even be better than this one, but I have that packed away. I took it to the show and I haven't unpacked everything yet. The convention last weekend. Thanks to whoever who dropped by to check out the demonstrations. Okay, here's a little bit of blue. Let's see if we can zoom in here. We can see this. I love, see the retention of that white down there gives me the opportunity to add this little tinge in there. Doesn't that kind of look kind of iridescent now with that little touch of blue like that? See what that did right there? I don't know, can you tell right there? Let's put a little bit right here too. Yeah, something like that. It gives it a little bit of a hue change. Okay, I need to be careful because there's not a lot of white in these areas if I want to add this, and I don't want to make that waterfall dark. You know, I want it to be still a little light. And if you wanted to, you can put a little just touch of this somewhere up in there, in that cloud, like about like so. There's a little hint of it there. I'm not sure if you can see it or not, or if the camera's picking that up. Okay. All right, so we got that going. This as a overall piece, I mean, it looks okay, but we still have that other imagery to come and other types of effects, so I think it'll really bring this piece to life, okay? I'm thinking about things that will soften the foundations of this scene a touch. You can put some leaves in here. I'm thinking about some of these leaves in here as well as coming from the top. I don't know, we can put a focal point in here. In that ad that I used in Rubber Stamp Madness, I put these little boating fishermen down here, and that was really fun. But well, let's see. Let's just get right into it here. Oh, I forgot about something. This is looking, all the shadows and things like that are looking fairly developed. I didn't even think about this, but black. I stamped out my imagery in black, and this is the type of thing that can really enhance things, okay? So, oh, that's really juicy, so let's go and blot this off a little bit first, okay? So I'm kind of using more of a gray than a black, but alright, let's get into it here. Let's add some deeper shadows into these rocks. Yeah, that's doing it. It's really quite a change with that. Okay, can you see that shading taking place? Let's try to add some in here. I'll try to keep my hand out. Now, let's see. Try to keep my hand out of the way a little bit. So I'm kind of tapping this right where that rock meets the water. I have the shadows in the water. I developed this area right in here yesterday on the other video, so I just put some tone over the top of it with the pigment ink, and it lightened that whole area up yesterday, so it was no big deal. Okay, so this tree here, let's give that tree a little bit of a stronger, kind of a light source on the left side of it. Okay, you see that? So I made the area darker on that side. And I'll do the opposite on this one. See how this one's fairly light over here? Well, I didn't leave the light out here, so it's dark, so I'll darken up this side of it right here. Okay, we have the shadows down in here, where waterfall meets water, okay, at the base of the rocks. Kind of adding a vignette over here, and I'll do the same thing over here, kind of making the perimeters a little bit darker, kind of containing the scene a little bit more. So this black can be quite dramatic, okay? Be careful about your usage of it. Kind of really utilize the drier version of it as you go along. Sometimes the scene gets fairly wet, so you really don't have to re-ink this very often when you get to it, because it's not transferring a lot of that ink to your scene. Alright, I think that is about right. Alright. I can do this forever. It's fun stuff. Like I said, I like doing these little refinements and things like that, and finding new opportunities in here. Alright, so here's this pink right here. If I want to kind of get some of this into these areas and develop those areas a little bit more with a very detailed little touch of some color in there. Alcohol pens are perfect for that, because you can get color exactly where you want it to go in a very, precise way. You can even layer it, like on some of these rocks in here. If you just want to kind of liven it up a little bit, why not? Alright, now, I think that is about right. Okay. Alright, now this is where I'm always kind of contemplating. Do I add in the additional imagery first before I put in my white pigment ink? Do I do the foreground first in VersaFine black? The VersaFine black should stamp over white, but I don't want to apply the white over the VersaFine, so I think the VersaFine black for real close foreground imagery will be last. I didn't use that yesterday because I just used the Marvy, but I think for this one I'm going to go for some extra depth with the use of VersaFine black pigment ink. It's a really dark, really thick ink. Alright, so let's take a look at this tree here. Okay, I'm looking at this. This could use a little bit more tone. Let's go darken up one side of it a little bit. Like so. Maybe this tree right here that I couldn't color, easily with like a paper towel. This can get in here. Like so. This is a brownish gray. Kind of hitting the sides of the tree. Away from the light. Here's a little bit green here. Why not, huh? Like that. Looks a little bit too much, so what I'll do is I just go back in with my previous color, and you just blend that green in a little bit. I don't use too much of my blender pen. I think there's one in my set, but I almost never use it. I just use the lighter version of an existing color that I happen to be using on whatever object I'm coloring. Okay, this is a little bit of a brown. Still looks a little bit too greenish right in here for me, so just bringing some of this right into it. Okay. Looks pretty good. Let's hit this in some shadows, maybe. I like using a lot of the dry, lighter versions of colors when I use alcohol pens. I don't really use the strong, real vivid ones, the way that I use pens. Okay, alright. Alright, let's get into the additional imagery in here. I want some images at the base of some of these rocks here. Just something to break up the forms, the strong verticals in here. Let's see. Some reeds like that would be good. I used a lot of my winter brush yesterday. Where did it go? Okay. Pausing video. Okay. Here we go. Here's the winter brush. Really love this image. Just in terms of the spacing and the crisp element of those branches in it, in conjunction with, where it's used. I kind of did it for like a winter type of scene, this leafless type of thing, but I don't know, I use it all over now. But those types of things in here, I just want to soften up, even this is a kind of a prickly image right here, it softens up some of those hard kind of 90-degree angles that the trees kind of make with the surface. So let's just go in here. I'm just using the black Marvy right now. I want an ink that's going to dry for me fairly quickly because I have some other things to do in the scene. Just your basic ripped paper towel masking, okay? Just cover up some of those rocks and you stamp it right on in there. Okay, so he's just something like that. Alright, I was looking at that water too. I think I can get a little bit more depth in my water. Let me try this with a walnut stain. I don't know if it's going to read down here at all, but these are some tiny rocks. That's what these ones are called. Okay, and I want these rocks to look like they're underwater, so I'll blot them off first. trying to get the right consistency. I'm wondering how hard I should stamp it out right here before I take it in here. Okay, so something like that. Now in the darker areas, we'll start kind of darker versions of it. But it just looks like this. Some of these are second impressions, third impressions. It just looks like that. They'll look much lighter, though, when they dry. Oh, why don't we, while I have this out, let's go for another impression. But let's do a couple different values. We'll do it in a medium value, and this one's a darker value. Something like that. Kind of the idea behind it is that it's semi-crisp image in there amongst all these tones that have been wiped in there, so it's kind of an element of sharpness, you know, something in there. Okay, let's see. We have this kind of leafless tree. Leafless pine, small. Okay, and I'll take that, blot it off once, and I'll go for an impression right in between these trees. I don't think I need to mask off those trees because I think it'll be lighter. Yeah, it's lighter than those other trees, so it just looks like it's farther back in the distance, like that. Maybe in the second one, I kind of like that in there. Let's go for another one. I'm just kind of using the top portion of it, and I'll go like this. Okay. So it looks like it's a smaller version of it, maybe, or farther off in the distance. This is like super layering. I don't usually do these scenes that are so in depth and extended and prolonged, but I just felt like doing it. I want to do something with like extreme kind of, I don't know, serenity or something like that. Or try to, at least. Alright, I'm thinking about some leaves, some hanging leaves. Okay. Maybe I'll use a couple different ones. Okay, let's go with the Marvy black. I think what I'm going to do, this is what I don't think about too often because I try to keep things much more simple, but this is a little tweak here. Okay, here's my thought. I'm thinking about stamping some of these leaves right in here, then adding in that kind of frosty mist over the top of them, and then going with the VersaFine and stamping over the top of that, so sometimes it'll be like there's a layer of this illumination or light between images. Okay, so that's the theory here. We'll see if it plays out. All right, let's even do something like this too. We'll take and let me see, where did my pen go? Okay, I think it was this one, olive brown. I like that olive brown. Let me add some of it to these leaves. I just inked this up with Marvy black again, so let's go on some of these leaves and make them a little bit more kind of varied. And we'll kind of blot some of them off, I think. Like that. Maybe it'll stamp out a little bit lighter, I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. See that right there? Alright, so we need a bunch more of these. That's in the lighter area, so I stamped that that green, but areas where it's much darker, I'm going to have to go all the way to black, so something like that. And see, this area over here is really dark, so I'll probably hit that with, well, let's save that area for the VersaFine black. I think same thing with over here. I want a really dark version of those leaves over here, so let's not do this in the Marvy black. Let's keep it with the VersaFine black, which is a very dark version of black. Okay. Thinking about some bushes coming from down here, or leaves on these rocks. You can even do something as dark as like these pine trees there. Oak branch is a good one too. Maybe I'll go really bold with this oak branch down here, but do it in black. It's kind of an idea. But what do I want right in here as a focal point? I really like doing that rider yesterday. She's like the perfect kind of figure to overlook this scene like that. Like she's just kind of going along, riding, and kind of stopping, you know. Maybe her favorite part on the ride or something. Let's do that. I think I don't know. I usually don't like doing the same thing, but maybe it can be kind of a little theme, you know, like a series or something. All right, so cotton ball, okay, and let me get my area cleared out here a little bit. White pigment ink, okay, just your regular white pigment ink. Let's add that in there. Should I do the light beams first, or should I do that kind of misting action? Maybe I should do the light beams first. The light beams are going to be coming from in here and flooding through the piece. I'm looking at an angle to see if anything is wet on here still, like really wet black ink. I don't think so. Looks fairly dry to me. Okay, but here's where I'm thinking, okay, so these light beams will be kind of running across like that. Maybe like through here. Down in here. Okay. I don't know how many. Some will be going in front of the trees and some will be going in back of the trees. Or a couple, I don't know, some. I don't want to do overkill, but let's see. Let's say that the light will be coming from, pick one kind of vanishing point, okay? Let's go with these leaves right about right here, okay? Don't do these leaves for one vanishing point and another vanishing point right here. I guess you could, but let's keep it simple and let's go for that, okay? And I'll show you what I mean by vanishing point right here. Okay, so what we're going to do is, I'm hesitating because I was trying to think of that oak branch. Okay, so that oak branch is going to be stamped over the top of the beam. Alright, so we'll go over this. So I'm lining this piece of paper up with that leaf that I was talking about. Okay. And like that. And we'll have some light coming through this scene. Let's have it coming from behind. This is where I have to do a little bit of planning, okay? It's a little bit confusing for me, too, because I don't know. I just usually have them kind of going in front of one thing or another, not a bunch of things. But this is a big scene that I'm working on here, so. All right, so that's that. Okay, so see this right here? My vanishing point, I have this emanating light coming from right there. That was my vanishing point. That was one of those leaves. And then here, I have this band of, this ray in the scene, okay? All you do is you take your pigment ink, like so, dabbing it in like so. Okay. And you start dabbing it in the area that's your light source. That's why we kept it white over there. You can't have these white beams usually coming out from a dark area. We're saying that this light, color of light, which is white, is the thing that's emanating from that source. Okay, so leave a little bit white, or a lot white. And I try to make my beams a little bit irregular. Sometimes I like them a little bit lighter on the top of it. Okay, so it doesn't have to be just an even coating of it. I'll show you what I mean by that when I lift this off, okay? All right, now some of it is in front of this tree, and I don't want that, so I'll just kind of wipe that off right here. All right, so there it is. I'm going to have it behind this tree, too, so I'll wipe that off in front of this tree, these trees, okay? See that? There's that one beam coming across there, like so. Okay, so we'll keep with that same vanishing point. See how I've kind of, I don't know if you can tell, but the top of that beam is a little bit lighter than the bottom side. And I think it looks a little bit more natural like that. Okay, just kind of wipe that off like so. All right, let's keep with the dramatic lighting, okay? I'll go right to that leaf again, and let's come down here. Okay, and I'll have that mist kind of, let's go down here like about like so. I might put an intermediate one in here somewhere too. Let's come like something like this. All right, now this beam is kind of coming right towards us, so it will be kind of wider than the previous beam. You don't have to think about any of that, though. Just vary your beam size, I think, for kind of a more natural look, maybe. Not all the time. I mean, you might want it super dramatic where these beams are really strong. Okay, now here's one of those things. When it starts getting over by the water, I'm going to illuminate the beam a little bit more. Okay, this is where my churning water is, so I'm thinking maybe the beam kind of gets a little bit stronger here because of all that moisture in the air that it's illuminating. Okay, that's the theory of it, at least. So kind of applying a lot of it right there. And then I'll taper it off, maybe. This way, I have to see what it looks like. I really don't know what it's going to look like until I kind of lift this. So, with some I might add a little bit more, or less, or whatever. You can wipe some of it off if you don't, if it's too strong. Okay, so there you have that. Looking pretty dramatic. Okay, let's go in here. Let's do this. Let's go in back of this tree again. I have to look where it is, okay? It's right there. And let's come with another beam in here across that waterfall. Okay, see that right there? I really like adding these in. It's just so much fun. Everyone loves seen this out in nature too, when we see these kind of beams coming down, you know, after a storm or through the clouds, wherever they are, but especially when they're kind of right amongst trees and things like that too. Thank you for yelling, Evan. Oh, they're talking about Sprite. Okay, come in with a kind of a thin beam here. All right, there's 4 beams right there. The question is, do I want to come this way? I don't know if I want to, because I don't want a beam to be too vertical. I kind of like this direction right here a little bit more, so I think I'll just keep with that. Let's go with the 5th beam though, kind of down this way. You can do a beam within a beam too. You can do like a smaller, thinner beam within kind of a wider beam, what I'm finding. Okay. Let's go something like this. The beam doesn't have to be solid either. You can kind of break it up a little bit, where it's kind of stronger than, you know, darker, because what that would represent is there's a beam of light, but then there's shadows, you know, created by the canopy of trees here too. Or just, you know, there's something in the way of the beam, you know. It doesn't have to be solid. Okay, see something like that. See this one right here where it's not like a full beam, it kind of breaks up, but doesn't that look kind of nice like that? You know, having it not so definitive maybe. I almost want something kind of in front of this tree again, maybe higher up here or something. Let's try that here. Let me see where I could put it. Maybe it starts off strong over here, comes across and goes in front of this tree, but then just kind of, maybe it stops somewhere, or it's just really kind of weak. I see like something like that. All right. The beams are I'm sure, you know, at this point in time, they're really the strongest element within the scene. You know, when we're talking about a focal point. I mean, those beams definitely get people's attention, okay? All right, so that being said, what this all represents is that there's kind of mist in the air. There's moisture, most likely, okay? Could be dust or whatever, but we're at waterfalls, so it should be moisture. So let's incorporate all these beams within the scene more, okay? So I'm going to start adding some of this mist and texture into the areas where light meets dark, okay? So right at the base of the falls, let's start off with that, and let's see if this will all kind of come together a little bit more. Okay, so see this kind of, that churning water right there in those fall areas, and right down in these clouds. This is why I wasn't really worried about anything that kind of happens. When you start doing things like this too, it just kind of blends everything together and kind of brings it all together. Okay, this is right in here. See that kind of illumination. This is like finger painting or something like that, okay? Leave your areas fairly light, and you can add a lot more into it. If it gets really dark in there, this kind of stands out, so maybe use it a little bit more sparingly. If you've taken the area and made it, toned it in, you know, a lot, then I wouldn't use so much of it. All the schools being kind of shut down for 3 weeks, I'm thinking about teaching the kids. I don't want them sitting around, so I'm thinking about having my son and his friends, at least some of the time when they're over here, teaching them some different art lessons, you know, drawing, painting. Well, I mean, not painting, but maybe doing a little stamping. My son recently bought a fountain pen, so maybe working on lettering, penmanship, and whatnot. Okay, let's see here. This kind of really gives that cloudy area really a nice feel in terms of a super light and airy type of effect. All right, something's happening to my cotton ball. Okay, switching to a new area. The cotton ball, that one was getting a little mucky. I want a real kind of a light application of that the ink. So this is where it kind of doesn't look, it's starting to look, that's a little bit too much right there. It looks a little bit more dream-like, you know, when you add this type of touch in here. And I always tell people, there's very few kind of opportunities in stamping, okay, where you see kind of a soft element. Okay, people might use pedal soft or, you know, those types of things, like physical things like that. But those are really nice because any type of kind of change in texture really extends the textural range of a given scene or, you know, card, whatever you're doing. You can do those clouds or something like that around a quote stamp or anything like that, and it just extends the visual vocabulary of a card. It extends it, okay? It doesn't, you know, eradicate something. But if you have kind of sharp and soft within a given piece, it can really add to the overall because you're playing contrasts against one another. Quite often we have different colors, we have light and dark within a scene, but we don't often have kind of soft and sharp within a scene, or just card in general, okay? So where that would come into play is, let's say you stamp out like a word stamp. And let's say it's just a word stamp stamped in some color on black paper. If you kind of illuminate part of that word or something like that, it would look like light is hitting it. But also from a textural standpoint, you're making part of it kind of soft, and that can play against the other crisp part that you didn't tap over, okay? So say, for example, like these leaves right here. See, these leaves are now kind of illuminated like that, but there are parts of them that are crisp. I mean, wouldn't that be great for something with lighting on it? It's kind of a real, I don't know, tranquil type of look to it. I mean, wouldn't that be great for a, you know, hope you don't need it, but like a sympathy card or something like that. You know, having something kind of soft like that and calming, relaxing, tranquil, peaceful. I think that would be great. But it's just you know, it's just to kind of alter the lighting of a given piece. It's really fun. Okay, let's see. Really, I've really got the water churning right in that area. See, I've added it kind of in those areas that are illuminated, like that. I don't know, if I was walking around this area here, I would certainly want to. I think it's definitely it's a worthy destination. If we saw these, this location and those beams coming through there, I'd certainly stop for a while if I could. Okay. All right. Fun with pigment ink. I don't know what the part's the most fun. Maybe the beams, maybe just the white pigment ink in general. I have so much fun with that technique. I love adding those types of elements into a scene. Okay, so let's add in some of our additional imagery. I still have the bleed-proof white possibility here, which I think I'll do. I think I'll add some kind of some nice splashing, crisp highlights down there. Boy, that scene really looks like it's glowing nicely. Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white. And your bleed-proof white expensive applicator. It's just a used toothbrush here. I'm just joking. Uh-oh, they're going to start playing the drums in the background. I'm not stopping this scene, though. Okay. Let's see here. I want to go for a nice spray. My toothbrush here kind of got smashed when I went to a demonstration last weekend. So it's kind of going all over the place. Okay, I think it's back in order a little bit. Okay, so I'm going for that little type of spray pattern down there. Okay, and we want it right in these areas. Let's see if I can get it right here without... This is fun too. This is who knew that I'd be doing this again after kindergarten. Yeah. It tends to be one of those techniques that you use with little kids, you know, like toothbrush and, you know, making stars or something like that. But see, that's right there. Isn't that fun? It's like that little crisp little type of texture within, you know, very kind of foggy, muted, you know, non-defined area, I should say, not muted. Okay, can you see that right there? I had to be careful because I don't want a big spray pattern everywhere. When it starts going out like that, I think that looks fine, but see that white within that space? There you have it there. Isn't that fun? I mean, sometimes I even put it up here, like where it looks like a little bit of a solar flare or something like that, you know? Or camera lens flare, I should say, not solar flare. But sometimes a little bit of those touches here and there can look kind of nice. You know, it's just a little spray pattern. It's just, it doesn't read as anything kind of logical, but it's just kind of texture within the card. Okay. Okay. I am really leaning towards using this writer in here. I think she'd be perfect for that space. Let's add these leaves in here first. I already have this mounted on my block with some tack and peel. Okay. This is a very dark black with versifying black, okay? And even though Marvy is pretty darn dark, this one is even darker and more solid. Alright. I need to be careful that I don't slide this because the tack and peel is, it's like really thick. Okay. Let's look at that dark impression next to that lighter impression. And with the Marvy inks, does that give it a lot of depth? Let me just use even a really small portion of it right here. So look at that depth of those leaves right there. See, it's, some of it's darker and some of it's lighter, so we create a lot of depth just with those two impressions like that. That's why I stamped the first impression first and then put the pigment ink down there. Otherwise, these ones would be kind of light too, which wouldn't look bad, but there's just a little bit more depth this way. All right, kind of going forward. Okay, there's the canopy of leaves right up here. Let's go with that same type of thing coming from below. We have all this area down here. And I'm thinking about going really bold with the oak branch. I usually have this as an overhang, but it's also very well suited for coming from below. And we'll go fairly bold with it. We'll use a big portion of it. Okay, I'm stamping it over the white pigmenting, so I'm spending a little bit more time allowing that ink to transfer like that. Okay, so I have that right there. Okay. Another one right here. It kind of represents something that's pretty close to us. Okay. There's that. And I'll come in from this side just to kind of frame things off. See how that looks right there? So it kind of gives us this bottom type of texture to go with the top type of texture. I'm thinking about one more in here. I kind of like that. So I used it like that. Maybe I'll turn it like this a little bit. Just so it doesn't look so redundant, or it doesn't look like the same image used multiple times. Okay. Lady Rider. Kind of the larger version of her. I'm doing this one in the Marvy ink, just so she's not quite so dark, so maybe it'll look a little bit recessed from the VersaFine impressions, so a little bit farther back, which she is. Darker things tend to look closer to us. And there she is. Another day, another ride, another spectacular time at the falls for her. She and her horse. Okay, look at that. Gets that background like that. I've never done that though, like, across these falls and whatnot. I could possibly refine some of this and kind of strengthen the beams a little bit, but if I put this paper down on that those VersaFine impressions right now, it's going to smear them. Here, it takes kind of overnight for those to dry. If you're in a convention hall where they're blasting the air conditioning out in Arizona, that dries like in an hour. I don't know, maybe less, I don't know. It dried so fast, that VersaFine ink. But, I don't know, just kind of making the beams a little bit brighter in some of these areas. Right, you know, where it crosses that mist might be kind of nice. But overall, I think we're done here. I can't think of anything else I might want to add. Sometimes I go in and add a little bit more highlighting in here. Possible some shading with the alcohol inks. I just don't, nothing's really standing out to me as, you know, possibly needing to be done that would enhance it. I don't think I want to add any more of those white dots. I think these little splashes down here are kind of effective, and I don't want to add more of it throughout. I don't think. I don't want other highlights competing with that, so that would kind of leave out my white pen. I'm kind of surprised I'm saying that, but I don't know. I don't see that being something I would do in here, so. Okay, anyway, I guess that is it. Full page scene, it's pretty big. And I really love the use of these beams in here, along with waterfalls. I think those make a perfect combination because, you know, you get that mist being, you know, that churning water from the waterfalls, contributing to this moisture in the air, and you get these beams kind of running through there. You have them going in back of the trees, in front of the trees for a little bit of extra dimension. And it's just so much fun to layer these types of things like that. I'll do a smaller, quicker version of this sometime real soon, maybe a quarter-page card-size scene. But I just felt like doing something big and majestic and tranquil all at the same time. They always say that kind of the ideal combinations of things are the right combination of grace and power. Okay, and I think waterfalls really fit the bill for that. I mean, most scenes in general can do that too, but everyone just kind of likes moving water, and that's why waterfalls are often kind of like landmarks within, the most hiked areas, or, the most visited areas within, your parks or whatnot. The ocean and whatnot, lakes and everything like that. So that fits the bill. So hopefully you got something from this card here. Well, I don't know if it's a card scene. Brown tones, okay? Just laying down your foundation with your main scenes, filling in around it, background, foreground. But as far as the color schemes go, for the most part, it was just using some brown tones like that, and then going in and kind of bringing in a little bit of that pink and blue. You've seen those types of color schemes before. It's been used a lot in design over these past, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years, where you have these kind of neutrals like that. Browns, I mean, they're warm, but then you see these kind of pastel versions of like pinks and blues in combination with that. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. The blue was very subtle and used very minimally, but I don't know if we can see it at all in here. There's kind of a bluish tinge maybe in here in a couple of different areas. No, not very much, but you can really see that pink kind of animating the whole place. And that pink kind of, from a color standpoint, kind of brings it alive. And of course, your white pigment ink doing most of the kind of heavy lifting in this scene. From a visual standpoint, we spent a lot more time with color in here, but when you add something like this into the mix, like that, I mean, what do people, what would someone notice first about this scene? And I think it would be those light beams in there. So using them in kind of variations of opacity. Most of them are translucent, meaning see-through. So just various kind of ranges of that type of translucency or opacity kind of lends itself to a really effective use of that type of application for that purpose, representing those beams like that. When I first started doing it, I gave the beams were really, really strong and hard, okay? It gives it a little bit of a different look, but I think when you can see through them, in various, ways, even within the course of one beam's, I don't know, stream, when you oscillate it a little bit, it looks a little bit better and more kind of natural. Okay, so anyways, hope you enjoyed the scene. Thank you so much. If you've really watched this full version, I'd send you a medal if I could, but hope you enjoyed it. Hope you liked the scene. Happy stamping. Keep stamping. And, I don't know, find some nice ways to relax during these crazy times. Okay. Okay, thanks for tuning in to the channel.